This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Hello and welcome to another chapter in the Living History Project of the Emory University Emeritus College. This is a project designed to capture the recollections of some very distinguished Emory University Emeritus faculty, and thus to provide a valuable addition to the history of this university. Today is December 5th, 2012, and we are very honored today to have as our guest Dr. Morton B. Waitzman, PhD, Professor of Ophthalmology and Physiology Emeritus of Emory University. My name is John Bugge. I am the chair of the Executive Committee of the Emeritus College, and it's my privilege to be the interviewer of Dr. Waitzman today. He retired in 1991, almost 22 years ago, after a long and distinguished career at Emory. And he has been a member of this Emeritus College since its inception 11 years ago. So we have the better part of an hour, and I'm hoping that that will suffice to do justice to the long and rich experience, both professional and personal, that he will be able to talk about today. I thought that we could begin, if you don't mind, with the history of your employment at Emory, starting, I think, in 1962, and then we'd backtrack and go back to your early life, especially your early days in Chicago.
In 1962, as you said, I was contacted by the chairman of the department at that time, Denis Calhoun, and whose name is very familiar to some of the old-timers around here. And he's an ophthalmology dynasty going back to Civil War days. And I was very impressed by the fact that I would be called down here for an interview at Emory, especially since I was ready for a move up from my previous position.
Where were you before?
I was at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, where I was director of ophthalmic research there, and so I had that experience. Now in 1962, Dr. Gerhard Brescher, who was chairman of the Department of Physiology, had found out that Dr. Calhoun, known as Finn, was interested in developing a program of research in ophthalmology, and that I might be available. So I was contacted and proceeded commuting between Cleveland and Atlanta over a period of time, and was finally offered a position here to begin in June of 1962. It was a very positive move for me because it was a big challenge. They had no research going on whatsoever here at Emory in the Department of Ophthalmology. And I also was offered a joint appointment in physiology, which was my parent discipline. So I became professor of physiology as well as professor and director of ophthalmic research in ophthalmology. So I had no place to do research. And Dr. Brescher from physiology offered me some temporary space in the physiology building, which is still there, but which is now moved. And the dean of the School of Medicine offered me 3 physical structures where I could develop a research program, one of which was acceptable to me, although if I describe it, you'd wonder why. It was a big stone building on Haygood Drive, 1708 Haygood Drive, which was infested with rats, mice, bugs, and everything you could imagine. It hadn't been used for several years. Going back to about 1930, so about 30 years or so prior to that, there was a ladies' club. It was a school in the DeKalb County systems. It had several roles. It was a Boy Scout headquarters. And then finally, when they found that there was no further interest in it, they just closed up shop and it became overgrown. But to me, it was a solid granite structure, similar to the building we're in now, Stone Mountain granite. And the dean said to me, I will let you have a certain amount of money, in fact about $50,000, to develop this area.
That was significant in those days, wasn't it?
In those days, significant, but I was very suspicious. I said, well, I remember saying, well, Dean, if it's not enough, I'll let you know. And he was, so we became good friends. I was very candid with him all the time, and he was with me. And we developed a program of research called the Stone House, and soon was developed to where it was productive as a research generating building. We were in the Stone House for about until about 1985 or 88, when the new headquarters for ophthalmology, which is known here as Clinic Building A and Clinic Building B, actually was Clinic Building B, which now houses ophthalmology, clinical ophthalmology, as well as research. And so when the research program was moved to the new facility, then the Stone House was no longer used. I found myself at the new quarters at that point.
Could you talk a little bit about how you got interested in ophthalmology, of all things? It's not everybody's choice.
This would really have to go back to my days in high school in Chicago. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, November 8, 1923, the youngest of 7 children. By the time I came around, nobody was interested in me, really. I was just the last of the production line for my mother. And I was born on Montrose Avenue in Chicago, 30-something Montrose Avenue, which today is still there, I understand. But I went to grade school and high school in Chicago. Now, of significance is the high school that I went to, John Marshall High School. Now, this was about 1936 when I went into high school, and I soon found out that I had time for some elective studies in high school. I was said we have an elective program opening up in blind reading for the blind students. Turned out that school was the one school where all of the training in blind rehabilitation and training and visual impaired was done at that high school. So they taught Braille, they had guide dogs, and they had a full program for visually impaired at John Marshall High School for students of that age. Well, when I was a junior, I think, as a sophomore, junior, I took an elective, which was reading to the blind. What could be easier than reading books to the blind? But I soon became totally enmeshed in this. It was the most important thing in my life. I soon learned how to read Braille, to write in Braille, Braille typewriter, and became thoroughly involved with the blind students of that school.
How many sighted persons actually learn Braille? It must be very few, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was developed by a gentleman called Louis Braille, who had a six-figure configuration representing each letter that you punched it out like the shad billet in Florida a couple of years ago, where there were unpunched out areas in paper, and that's what Braille is, just punched out areas in a configuration of 6 positions. And I learned it very fluently, and in fact, I became very, very friendly with the blind students and became socially involved, engaged. Would play poker with them at their homes. penny ante stuff. But they accused me of cheating because I could read Braille. And of course the answer was I was cheating. I read it all the time, and I never lost more than a quarter or one more than a quarter. And I became so thoroughly involved. There was a blind student Boy Scout troop 300, and I became an assistant scoutmaster, went on field trips with them, and was totally involved with the blind on Boy Scout expeditions. The most scholarly blind student of the year was awarded a seeing eye dog, and it soon became apparent to the trainer of those dogs that I was interested in the dogs and their owners, and they offered me a position, but I was a volunteer. I didn't get paid for any of this. That's the story of my life. I've never been paid very much. That's why I became a college professor. But I was offered the job of helping to train these dogs. I remember Marshall Fields in Chicago, up and down the escalators, and in and out the elevators, working with the dogs and the trainer and the blind person. And it was a learning experience for me, which maybe went on for about 6 months or a year. This is a long-winded answer to your question. When I was graduated from high school in about 1941, I think it was, I could be off a year, I soon became interested in world events such as Pearl Harbor. So December 7th, 1941, as we all know, Pearl Harbor Day, which comes this week. And I wanted to go into service. I, like so many other young people of that day, wanted to serve our country. I couldn't wait to be able to enlist. Didn't want to wait for the draft. As a result, after going to a junior college in Chicago for a short period of time, I enlisted January 1943. Now, you have to understand that when I finished high school and my involvement with the blind was such that at that stage in my life, it became very clear what I was going to do in my life whenever this war was over, especially. I was going to solve all the problems of blindness. I was going to get involved in research and solve all the problems of blindness. Whatever it is, no one will be blind. We'll take care of all that. That's how you felt when you're at high school age. Right. But I continued to feel that way, strangely enough, even while I was in service. And that's the story of how I became interested in ophthalmology, subsequently in ophthalmology research. One thing kept me going through my military days, which were very difficult days indeed, was the fact that I was going to go to school and do this wonderful thing for the blind people of the world. It's all I had in mind. And I had to get out and go to school, period, continually. So when the war finally was over, that's exactly what I did. I sought out a school that actually was on a quarterly system. I learned that the quarterly system turned over more rapidly than the semester system, and therefore I could go to some school more rapidly. And it turned out to be Illinois Wesleyan University in Bloomington, Illinois, the home of the State Farm Insurance Company. Just a plug. I don't work for them. They don't even pay me. Like everything else, I was a volunteer with that. But that's where I started school, Illinois Wesleyan, and I was a great student. I mean, nothing was too hard for me. But
this was on the GI Bill, I guess. Yes.
Pardon?
It's on the GI Bill, right?
Yes, on the GI Bill.
Yeah.
Thank heaven for the GI Bill. Like so many others, were able to go to school on the GI Bill. After about a year and a half at Illinois Wesleyan, my father became ill, and it was advised that he moved to a different climate, which was Miami, Florida. And I was the youngest of 7, but my other siblings by that time were either married or committed or something, and I was uncommitted. I hadn't met anyone of my choice at that time. So I took on the position of helping my father and went to school down there, went to the University of Miami in about 1947, 48, where I started at school and graduated from there a couple of years later. That's where I met my wife. We're on a blind date, which was appropriate way of expressing it for me. And we had a great deal of interest in common, and I made clear to her and to other ladies whom I was dating that I was a very serious guy about my dating. I wanted to settle down and do what I wanted to do in my life, including finding the person that I could live with. And 63 years later, we're still around.
So you went on to the University of Illinois for the
Yes,
PhD?
when I graduated at the University of Miami, and by that time, my wife-to-be and I had enough of a commitment that she decided to join me. I was accepted in the graduate program at the University of Illinois and the graduate program in physiology, and with minors in biochemistry and nutrition. And this was the most appropriate thing in the world that I could do, because I knew that research on blindness, you had to learn the basics of it, and that would be physiology and biochemistry, and that's what I was going to be doing. So I was very ideal about it, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. I had thoughts about medical school there, but that wouldn't do the same. I didn't want to go around treating a bunch of sick eyes, but I wanted to do the research part of it and remove all that from society. And we went to the University of Illinois. Our first child was born there. We were married there, then our first child was born there. And in about the years escape me, about 1957 or 8, 53, I was offered a position at Case Western Reserve University, Cleveland, Ohio, which I readily accepted because it involved moving into the departments of pharmacology and also the Division of Ophthalmology as Director of Research in the Department of Surgery. Ophthalmology was a division in the Department of Surgery at that point, which was good. I've always remembered that when I first came here to Emory University, Finn Calhoun said, "You know, Morton, you should know right away that we're a department, not a division. In surgery, we are a department." He was very proud of that fact, and I was happy about that too.
You are among those whom Tom Brokaw, in his famous book called The Greatest Generation. And I would like to, if I could, to take you back to your service in World War II and have you talk a little bit about that. You enlisted when you were, 19?
Yes.
And where did you do your basic training and all that sort of thing?
I had something in my background was to combine with the basic training that I had that led me to being assigned to the European Theater of Operation. And the training that I got there, I recognize the fact that when you're in the Army, you did what you were told to do and you didn't ask questions. You were assigned this and you were assigned that. So I was assigned to Camp Crowder, Missouri, after a review of my background and credentials, and was involved in Morse code training. I became very much involved with combat communications, and the communication that was most important was Morse code. So I became very fluent in Morse code over a period of years, a period of months, I should say. And so that in November of 1943, after almost a year of training, I had this very clear and strong background in Morse code. And the Army categorized me as what was called a 777 fixed station radio operator, which meant I could communicate at the highest level in headquarters at high-speed Morse code or whatever it took, particularly in combat communications. So, and I have to remember that when I was in high school, the other thing that was very positive in my exposure there was having learned French. Became very fluent in French after 4 years of that and study on my own. So I left Camp Crowder with a skill in Morse code. By the way, to this date, I can say anything in Morse code very rapidly. And you give me a word, I'll give it to you. And da 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 da. That's your name. And something strange happened after my training at Camp Crowder. Remember, by that time, we're talking about this was the end of 1943. Our military was very much enmeshed in the Pacific theater operations as well as the European theater operation. And I was actually asked, this is a remarkable thing, which I would prefer doing. The military never did that. I could either go to St. Louis, Missouri, to Officers Candidate School in engineering and become an officer in engineering. And engineering, what's that? That had no appeal to me whatsoever. Or, with my background, I could go to the European Theater of Operations. Given that choice, I said I wanted to go to the European Theater. By that time, I had heard of what was going on there in general with the persecution of many peoples, including particularly the Jews, and of being of the Jewish faith. This was a very important thing to me, as well as to many of my comrades. And they actually followed through on that acceptance of going to the European Theater. So, in December of 1943, I found myself about to embark on one of the more miserable experiences of my life, going on a troop ship, the Mauritania, which was a British luxury liner, and for 1,000 or 1,500 people, and they jammed 25,000 GIs on that troop ship, the Mauritania. A British-controlled ship. The food was terrible. The British did not know how to cook then. I presume they know how to. They can make fish and chips. That's about it. And no place to sleep, no place to eat really, and it was cold, and the ship was zigzagging across the ocean for a long period of time. Seasick every second.
Zigzagging to avoid.
Zigzag to avoid German submarines, which were sinking a lot of merchant ships as well as troop ships. Yeah. Well, there were 25,000 of us on board that ship, so if they did not anything right, they succeeded in getting us from New York to Southampton, England, where we arrived in January of 1944. At that point, I was assigned to what was called a combat signal communications team, and was assigned to Kidderminster, England, to continue my training there and to become acclimated to the levels of operation that I would have to be familiar with. I was soon asked, ordered is not the right word, asked is not the right word, ordered to a interception base in London, where I was intercepting German radio, and our purpose of that was we were trying to break down the German Enigma code, which was the code responsible for their naval operations, which was in turn responsible for the sinking of many American ships, their submarines. And I was also in direct radio contact with the French, with the Force Française Intérieure, the French underground, because my mission, I knew, was whatever else it was, I would be in touch with the FFI, so it was called the French underground. So I was intercepting Morse code from German and French sources in that process of interception.
Did everyone use Morse code, or were they actually speaking in their own languages? They didn't
Well,
do that, did they?
a lot of people use it, but I was able to do it at low or high speed.
Oh.
In fact, I could handle it. The speed was so great when we got above 40, 50 words a minute that you had to be able to type it. So I became a pretty good typist at that time too. But when I wound up in field operations, I never used a typewriter. I wound up working more at low speed. So at least I was flexible. They made me a very flexible communications person, including wire training, how to lay field wire and establish communications that way too. So I was in this intercept station, and much of what we intercepted from the German code wound up at Bletchley Park in London, which was the English code breaking station. And eventually, between what we did and what was done by the capture of a German submarine, they captured an Enigma hardware program intact, and put the two and two together. And the German high command never knew that this submarine was captured that way. The Navy was able to do this in a very efficient, effective manner, so that we did a good job of breaking down their Enigma code and very rapidly cut back on the sinking of mercantile ships in the Atlantic Ocean. I was assigned about February of 1944 to the Midlands of England for jump training. Now, because of my involvement with the French underground, they wanted me to land with the 101st Airborne or 82nd, whichever, to immediately be in contact with the French underground. And I was sent to Midlands for jump training, and I had jumped from many of these so-called jump towers, which they have in Fort Benning, Georgia. I've seen them down there too. But my training was abruptly aborted, and somewhere around March of 1944, the training was aborted, March or April, I guess it was, and we were soon sent to our embarkation sites, which meant that we were getting prepared for our movement on D-Day, our liberation of France, actually. We had no idea still when or where, but we knew it would be in France, and we knew that it would be off of the Channel, the English Channel coast, and it turned out to be June 5th of 1944. The weather was bad, and Eisenhower made it June 6th because of the weather. About 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning, I actually came in H-hour, minus about 90 minutes or so. It was before the actual D-Day of 7:30 in the morning. And because there were 3 missions that I had to be involved with, which meant we had to come in prior to the main body. And about 10 miles offshore in the English Channel, the weather was awful. Again, a miserable time as far as the weather conditions were concerned. It was pitch black, raining, seasick, but you had to climb down the cargo net of this mothership into what's called LCI, an infantry landing craft. And on my back, I had a radio, weighed about 60 or 70 pounds, spools of wire, a rifle, hand grenades, ammunition, and so on. So I had to do the double job of communications and infantry, because I was assigned to the 115th Infantry Regiment of the 29th Infantry Division. The 29th Infantry Division was Saving Private Ryan Division. That's the story of Saving Private Ryan was about our landings on D-Day, and we were the H-hour troops who landed with certain missions in mind. We finally succeeded in getting into the infantry landing craft. We lost several of my comrades were lost jumping off of that cargo net in the middle of the night. If you missed, you went straight down. The water was a few miles deep at that point, and there was no surviving. And right from the beginning, I guess I would have to say I was very, very fortunate, very lucky. And we had assigned to us combat engineers whose mission was to provide a path of about 3 feet, 4 feet, so they could neutralize the booby traps and the dynamite the Germans had placed along the beaches. Fortunately, because it was early in the morning, we came in at high tide, low tide I should say. The water was out and we could see the obstacles on the beaches, and they were able to provide a safe path for us to get to the seawall as rapidly as possible. And I had 3 missions. I remember them very well. One was to contact the French underground, let her know I'm here, and we need your help in terms of any German troop movements on shore. And this was at Omaha Beach, Normandy in France, along the English Channel, and Brittany is called. And we had to contact them, which I did. By this time we could use voice radio, and I could communicate with them either in voice, by voice or code. And I did both, whichever was convenient. My second mission was to be in touch with the Allied naval forces offshore to find out whether their shells were landing, telling them that their shells were landing too long or too short. Too long meant they fell on the French villages and killing many innocent French people, or too short, landing in the sea. Their role was to make holes on the beach for our troops to have shelter during the main invasion on D-Day in Normandy. They did a very poor job of making those shell holes, but I forgave them. They tried their best. We had to move inland to hills beyond the shore as quickly as we could. There are many stories about things that took place on the beach, the numbers of casualties and dismembered bodies that were all over the place with German machine gun fire and mortar fire and artillery fire. It was a bad time. It turned out we had in our unit, about 7,000 or 8,000 casualties killed and wounded on the beaches at that time. Military action or mission of the 29th Infantry Division and its accompanying divisions like the 30th and 28th, 2nd Armored and others, was to move across the bocage, the hedgerows of France as quickly as possible. There was much fighting done along the bocage. That was a dirt piles which separated French farmland, and get to St. Lo, France as quickly as possible, which the mission initially was for our military to be in St. Lo approximately the end of June of 1944. We didn't get there until middle of July with the casualties that went with it. Very, very costly military operations from there to St. Lo. In St. Lo, France, after liberating St. Lo, I'm very careful about saying liberating or capturing. In France, we're liberators, and we're welcomed very, very enthusiastically by the French. The ladies, especially, with their flowers and kisses and so on, and we gave them whatever we could in return, cigarettes and chocolate and so on. And but they were a very friendly bunch whenever we could communicate directly with them, which I fortunately was able to do. But in St. Lo, we had other decisions to make. There was a mission for the liberation of Paris that would take place on August 28th of 1944, and because of my background and many of my comrades, we were ordered to join General Leclerc. He was a general of the French Liberation Army who liberated Paris in August 28th or 25th of 1944. And so I was there with the liberation of Paris. And again, welcomed by the French, but the reality of the military operation was there too. There were German snipers in apartment buildings all over the Champs-Élysées where we were dug in. And so we had to fight and greet the French at the same time. Fortunately, Paris was never badly damaged. I think that the high Nazi command decided it was a nice place to go to when they could. So they never really badly damaged it, but there were problems there that we had to deal with. And into September of 1944, the main fighting and the peninsula of France, Brittany Peninsula, took place, and our division, the 29th Infantry Division, joined together and moving rapidly across France from Paris under General Patton's tanks, and wound up in the liberation of Luxembourg, Belgium, and finally into Holland in November of 1944. After we liberated Maastricht, Holland, with the 28th Infantry Division, we liberated a town called Amstenrade, and this was our jump-off point. We're about 2 miles from the German border now. And we had to be prepared for that because that was going to be very vigorously defended. And we moved into a park in Amstenrade where we were dug in, and the Dutch people of that town were asked permission to bring us to their homes for a warm meal and a hot shower, which we gladly accepted. And then came the Battle of the Bulge. We were there at that time. The Battle of the Bulge took place, and I won't go into that at all. It's about a month and a half process that took a lot of neutralizing, a lot of casualties on our part, and we were dug in at the place called the Rohr River, just in Germany, across from the city of Jülich, Germany. So we're in Germany now. And about late February of 1945, we crossed over into Germany and captured a town called Jülich, and it was there that I had a severe scalp injury and was unconscious for a period of time. But after 7 days, I was not killed, but I was well enough to get back online. So it was at that point that we were ordered to launch into a big German city called Mönchengladbach. Mönchengladbach turned out to have the military headquarters of Paul Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister under Hitler. And we didn't know it. We're just a bunch of soldiers who were following orders to liberate this, capture this or capture that. But we did capture that place and moved on from there to our first exposure to the horrors of the Holocaust and Nazi behavior in the days of World War II. A place called Dinslaken. We smashed through the gates of Dinslaken after leaving Mönchengladbach, and there we were greeted by thousands of dead bodies. Gasoline had been poured on these people, and they were simply burned alive. They were rounded up as we were approaching knowing that they couldn't send them off to forced labor camps or concentration camps, they were simply murdered on the spot in these areas. As we marched through Germany, we liberated several forced labor camps, one of which was a place where a gentleman whom I was talking to, I was talking to a church group here in Atlanta a few years ago, and he came up to me and said, "Thank you for liberating us. We had liberated him and his mother at this particular forced labor camp." He was a Roman Catholic from Warsaw. They had been put on a train, sent to this place, and his father was murdered, taken off the train and murdered in Sachsenhausen. But and to this day, that man, he's here in Atlanta. We're good friends, we're in close contact. Toward the end of April, in 1945, was the Jewish holiday of Passover, and the chaplaincy said that we were able to go back to Mönchengladbach and celebrate Passover at the home of Paul Joseph Goebbels, and to take along with us many of the survivors who were on the roads who had been liberated from various forced labor camps. And they knew about the history of the Jews under Egyptian slavery thousands of years ago, and were happy they wanted to be with us in that liberation. After this period of time, we went back to our point of departure near Hanover, Germany, and were ordered to move south to a place called Dora Mittelbau. Dora Mittelbau is about 20 miles south of Hanover in Germany, and we came on a nest of German machine gunners at this area that looked very much like Dinslaken, and we neutralized those machine gunners. We're experienced infantry, and we had no trouble doing that. 40 or 50 or so were neutralized at that point. We blew down the gates of Dora Mittelbau, and there were greeted by the same scene that we had seen before, thousands of dead bodies, and the stench of beyond belief. Many of them had been lying out in the open for days and weeks, waiting for burial. This camp was Dora Mittelbau. It was part of the Buchenwald complex. In Dora Mittelbau, they were manufacturing the V-1 and V-2 rocket bombs that were being launched into England to kill as many people as possible, and they succeeded in that. The V-1 was a subsonic, and the V-2 the supersonic missile, being made by under Werner von Braun in Dora Mittelbau. So that was the purpose of that concentration camp, which we were able to eventually capture and neutralize, and moved on from there.
I want to break in, and if you don't mind, and also at the same time read something that's in your honor. About 8 weeks ago, you were awarded the French Légion d'honneur, the Legion of Honor. And the announcement read, "In order to express France's eternal gratitude to those who liberated it from oppression from 1944 to 45, the newly appointed Consul General of France in Atlanta, Denis Barbet, will bestow the Legion of Honor upon 12 American World War II veterans from the U.S. Southeast in a ceremony to be held on September 27, 2012. Founded by Napoleon Bonaparte in 1802, the National Order of the Legion of Honor is the highest honor in France. It recognizes eminent services to the French Republic. Recipients of this honor are designated by the President of the Republic." And in awarding the Legion of Honor, the consul said this: "Mr. Morton B. Waitzman joined the Army on January 2nd, 1943 at the age of 20. He was trained in communications before joining the combat communications of the unit of the infantry. In March 44, he was sent to London, where he was in charge of radio operation and interception of German messages. He was also responsible for communication with the French resistance. On June 6, 1944, Mr. Waitzman was sent to the 115th Infantry Regiment as a radio operator. He then took part in the storming of Omaha Beach and the liberation of Saint-Lô. In August 44, Mr. Waitzman was transferred to the French Army commanded by General Leclerc and participated in the liberation of Paris. Upon return to the 115th, he took part in the Battle of Ardennes before crossing the Rhine on into Germany. Mr. Waitzman and his unit also helped liberate the working concentration camp Dora Mittelbau. He was decorated with the Bronze Star for his participation in combats during the French and European theater operations. He was also awarded the Medal of Jubilee and a certificate of thanks from the state of Illinois for his participation in World War II. We want to thank you for this interview.
Thank you, sir.
I say that on behalf of all the membership of the Emeritus College, and if I may speak for the whole university, I will. But your personal history is emblematic, I think, of what is best about America. And we thank you for the privilege of being able to hear your story.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.